Continue, and now welcome to the show. I'll give the full introduction in a moment of Roshini Rajkumar, but Roshini, you had the opportunity, was it earlier this year, was it last year, to meet Joe Bonamassa at a fundraiser event in Minnesota. Tell me about that.
It was actually in L.A., so it was October 2021, and it was the inaugural Jam event for an organization called Columbus Children's Foundation, CCF, and they're based in both North Carolina and Spain.
Oh, okay.
And, yeah, their leader is a dear friend of mine, Laura Broad, and she put on this inaugural event, bringing together some amazing jazz and rock musicians. John Oates was there, but it was Joe Bonamassa was the namesake
and
for the inaugural jam. Mm-hmm.
Keb Mo was there. I'm so jealous of you.
Keb Mo, yep.
You got to meet two of my favorites.
And yeah, it was this intimate concert for about 125 people.
And you'd never heard of either of them before that.
Sadly, I hadn't. I feel, I have good eclectic musical taste, but I definitely got some wonderful schooling that night.
Well, I have to tell you, I'm jealous, especially since you weren't familiar with them and you got to have that opportunity. But good for you in supporting a good cause. So Roshini Rajkumar is our guest for the rest of the show. She is the host of the Crisis Files podcast, which we'll actually tee up and get a little understanding of in a moment, because I think that can help us to understand the topic of the rest of this time on the show, and that is the PR winners of 2022. Roshini is someone who's called upon to help deal with crisis management issues for clients. And on her radio show that she used to host in WCCO in Minnesota, she would discuss the heated current events topics as well as those crisis management issues. Roshini is called upon by media across the U.S. for commentary about crisis management and political strategy. She hosted Real Talk with Roshini on WCCO radio, as mentioned before, from 2012 to 2021. And her book, Communicate That, is in its third edition. The communication executive coach and media consultant joins me now. Roshini, Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas, Jimmy. It's great to wind down the year and especially be with you on this lovely holiday weekend.
Yeah, I mean, it is a blast to have a Christmas Eve spectacular show. It's just such great. I mean, do you realize that you were following Santa Claus?
Santa is a hard act to follow, but I'm going to try to stay off the naughty list.
You know what? With your PR savvy, I think you'll probably be just fine. Roshini, before we get into some of the PR lists and so forth, just briefly, and we talked about this before with you on the show, but tell us about the Crisis Files, what that's about, and how things are going so far.
Right, and thank you so much for being one of the first media hosts to bring me on when we launched the podcast in August, and I know you had me on, I think it was Labor Day weekend, but the Crisis Files is currently a podcast episode, or case file as I like to call them. Number 23 drops on Monday. It's a special message episode from me and my 4-person crisis squad. But what the show does is really dive into various crises in people's business worlds, personal worlds, a lot of ripped from the headlines inspiration. We will take some of those headlines and dive into how could they have done this differently or better, or how do you prevent something like this from happening in your life. And the Crisis Files, originally, as I was winding down my Sunday radio show in Minneapolis, I was starting in 2021 to concept it, and really concepted it as a TV show. We shot the pilot this April. There is a television pilot that I'm in the early stages of pitching to streaming and TV executives. So I hope to bring that to a screen near you one day. But there was kind of a clamoring for this sort of content. So when it was being edited, the pilot, I thought, I got to get this out there sooner. I want to talk about the Crisis Files and our subject matter. And that's what birthed bringing it out in its first iteration as a podcast. So since August, we've been a podcast about Crisis Files. Sometimes you'll hear from members of my crisis squad with me. Sometimes you'll hear from other guests. And Jimmy, I'd love to have you on in the future. There are so many crises out there that we really want to give holistic as well as organic advice from different lenses, the crisis lens, the legal lens, the PR lens, the mental health lens. In fact, Dr. Cheryl Ziegler is part of my crisis squad, and she's based right there in Denver.
Very cool. Well, best of luck in pitching the TV pilot. I hope to be able to watch it on television before we know it. So let's talk a little bit about PR winners. Look, there's so much negativity right now that's going on. How about we look at those who actually have maybe improved their stature, who've had pretty good years? And I think you can't really get too far in that regard without talking about Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who just so happened this past week to speak in person to the United States Congress and also to talk with the President of the United States at the White House. And this is as his country is under siege by Russia.
You know, it is really hard to ignore him this year. And, you know, Time named him Man of the Year. I mean, here's the deal. Obviously, things are so sad and scary and just up in many directions in his country. But on many levels, he's also a winner. He's a winner when it comes to just sheer grit and intention. And you know how I love intentionality. And he had this vision of what to do for his country, with his country people, against Russia and against really Putin, because I think there are a lot of people in Russia who actually would be very much in support of the Ukraine, but they've got Putin going for them over on the Russian side. So when you talk about just his own intention for his country, I don't think he set out trying to galvanize the world or trying to get, you know, some invitation to this country, the U.S., other places. You know, he really had an intention. He lived it out. That intention motivated the rest of us. We saw, you know, I think the United States even needed a vision on how to remember what freedom is all about, what people in the past have fought and died for our country. And here, right now in modern times, the Ukrainian people are doing that, led by their very, very intentional president. So, you know, from PR, from actually a nationalistic as well as just a freedom fighter, all of those layers are big wins for the president of the Ukraine and for his people for sure. And I think he helped to wake up the rest of the world in coming behind him, his people, and really remembering what it means to have freedom and to have liberty. And for that, he's really right up there on my list this year.
So I'm not much of and I think that's well said, by the way, and I couldn't agree more. I've been inspired by Zelensky and his leadership that he has shown on the world stage. In fact, without that passion, that fiery spirit, without the approach that he has taken to showing leadership and to galvanizing the world, Ukraine might be under submission of the Russian government by this point, but that hasn't been the case, and that's a testament to Ukrainian President Zelensky. Now, I'm not much of a soccer fan. I guess they call it football on the world stage. But there was the victory of Argentina for their World Cup in Qatar. And in particular, there's the soccer player Lionel Messi, who's noted for the team. Talk to us about that one, especially given the global significance here. We're talking about two global phenomena, if you will, right now.
Right. Well, this is a bundle for me. So on my 2022 winners list, when it comes to PR and optics, I would bundle Messi, Argentina, and actually the nation of Qatar together. But let's start with Messi and Argentina. Okay. So Messi is definitely one of the top ranked players, but he was just so long has gone without a World Cup win. And whereas some of his peers have had those wins, and it really is the crown jewel, right, in the game of football, as we call it in the world, but soccer to us Americans. And the very fact that his nation was behind him, soccer fans were behind him, and he was being watched, and his team, on such a global stage, was just, I mean, you couldn't have scripted a better ending. I mean, that match with France, and France also being having a star player that everyone was rooting for. So you just couldn't have scripted a better final on that. As sad as I was, the U.S. wasn't in it. The U.S. men's team isn't quite at the caliber of Argentina and France yet. Hopefully one day. So you've got to give Messi a win. You got to give Argentina, the country. I mean, I don't know if you saw the pictures in pretty much all the papers of people streaming out into the streets and celebrating and crying and laughing and hugging. I mean, they came together as a nation. It was like they just needed that on so many levels. So that was wonderful. And then the nation of Qatar, which hasn't always gotten much attention, people still wonder how to pronounce it. And it found out, I believe it was back in 2009, that it was getting the 2022 World Cup. Well, it whipped into motion and built a bunch of stadiums, and all eyes from the world were on Qatar. And now everyone will know where it is, just, the significance of what it brought to this sport. So that's kind of why I bundle those together, but each definitely have some distinct, separate winnability moments as well as a group. So congratulations on that to those three parts of my list.
I've got 1 minute left in this segment before we got to run to a break for one more person. This movie star was besieged for a very long time because of his ex, who went after him big time and maligned him. And we learned a lot more about Johnny Depp. You have him on your 2022 PR winners list. Talk to me briefly about that.
Yeah, this one might be unusual for a lot of people because we learned a lot of really ridiculous things. And actually, I was on Court TV. I was on some different outlets talking about this trial. I mean, it is crazy, the ugly things we learned about Johnny Depp and Amber. I mean, it was just ugly. I mean, I didn't want to learn those things about Johnny Depp. But he had a good legal team. He had the fans on his side. Not that you need fans, not that the fans are deciding, the jury's making decisions. But that all makes him a winner on this list because he overcame some really ugly narratives to really come out prevailing and didn't have a huge loss in the defamation trial against him.
Well, and now the one who's facing consequences is Amber Heard. Roshini Rajkumar is our guest, communications and crisis coach. She's host of the Crisis Files podcast and her website, ownyourwow.com. We got to take a break. On the other side, let's pick up this question. Is Elon Musk a PR winner of 2022? That and more coming up in the final segment of this Christmas Eve edition of the Jimmy Sengenberger Show. We'll go to break as we continue on News Talk 710 KNUS. One of my absolute favorite Christmas tunes. This is the final bumper of the Christmas season. Jingle Bell Rock. Good to be with you. Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah as well. Thanks again to Rabbi Jonathan Hausman, the Electric Reverend Jimmy Bratcher, Santa Claus, and our final guest of the show, Roshini Rajkumar, for joining us next weekend, Saturday, 6 to 9. My good friend Jeff Crump will check in with us. And then Biff Gore, incredible voice. He's going to be bringing his guitar. We'll jam. We'll do our annual jam session for the new year, and we will talk religion. He's a pastor. We'll talk politics. Who knows what will come up. Plus, the Jimmy Jr. Blues Band playing at Dakota Tavern next Friday night, 7:30 p.m. in Parker. Join us then. Roshini Rajkumar is our guest, crisis strategist, licensed attorney, host of the Crisis Files. Roshini, here's one for you as we talk about PR winners of 2022. Well, here's a question. Elon Musk. Is he a PR winner? I mean, beginning of the year, earlier in the year, April, he announces he wants to buy Twitter. Then there's big pushback from Twitter. Then he decides, not so sure. Then Twitter's like, we're taking you to court. This thing's going to happen. Ultimately, out of court, he agrees to fulfill the purchase. He did so, and now it's really interesting what's happening in the Twitterverse at this point under Elon Musk. So, Elon, winner, loser?
Well, and that answer depends on what time of year you would have asked me. So we did, I believe it was case file number 5 on the whole Twitterverse and Elon Musk versus Twitter. and the question of who's David, who's Goliath in that situation. And then eventually that sale did go through. Had you asked me that question in October, November, I would have said Elon Musk definitely a winner of 2022. But here we are on Christmas Eve 2022, and we have seen the last 4 to 6 weeks of just chaos on Twitter. He owns the platform. He's tweeting. He's being reckless. So he is not on my winners list. He became very naughty at the end of the year, Jimmy.
So naughty in what way exactly? Because, look, we got folks in our audience, and to some extent me, who are kind of liking what he is doing as far as shaking up Twitter. So when you say he's not on the winner list, let's unpack that a little bit more.
For sure. Okay. So I like the shaking up. I always love disruptors when disruptors have good intention and they're honest and fair. So if you're going to shake it up so that people can have free speech on Twitter and we can eliminate trolls on Twitter, then you're a winner. But he's kind of doing a combo, right? And then making the blue check, $8, you get a blue check. Now the blue check really means nothing. I mean, I just don't know what his vision is anymore. At one point, I could see he had a vision. He wanted to get the trolls, the bot accounts off, the junk that really Twitter has become on many levels. He was doing mass layoffs. I don't know if all of those were necessary, but he's also sometimes putting things out there just to kind of needle in ways that I don't know are always very good. So I want him, if I were coaching him, and I don't know that he's coachable, if I were coaching him, I would say, what is your platform? Meaning, what's your vision? What do you stand for? And let's then tweet and run the platform in that way. So now it looks like possibly he's asking, there's going to be a new CEO. He's asking the Twitterverse, who should be the CEO? Should I step down? So that's an interesting also PR campaign that he's started.
And that's one I wanted to ask you about. And we've got a little over a minute left, Roshini Rajkumar, is he's been doing these polls. And in fact, he did a poll saying, should I step down as CEO? It was resoundingly a yes. He's done other polls that have been quite interesting. What do you make of that sort of governing a platform and a business by poll?
All right. Well, I don't think that's the way to go. I mean, as someone who understands board governance, but fine. So they said yes. I'd agree with that. Someone else should be the CEO. Now start the journey to finding that great CEO that's going to get Twitter back to its glory days. We're talking the early years. We're talking, 06 to 2011. That's when I really looked to Twitter. I joined in 2009. It has really fallen down as a platform. I'd love him to lift it back up.
Roshini Rajkumar, always interesting insights. TheCrisisFiles.com is where to go for the Crisis Files podcast. Best of luck getting that picked up for a television show. Merry Christmas, my friend. Very grateful to have you on once again today.
Thanks so much, Jimmy. Merry Christmas to you and your listeners.
Merry Christmas. Enjoy that 80-degree weather over in California. We're a little jealous. Roshini Rajkumar, everybody. OwnYourWow.com and thecrisisfiles.com. That is it for me today. We are going to